Thirteen Petalled Rose by Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, or Steinsaltz, depending on where you're from. This is Chapter 1, Worlds, and we'll be discussing the basic notes on this book. It's not meant to replace a book. This is a modern classic that has introduced readers to the world of mysticism, I suppose you could say, that requires no prior advanced knowledge. That's what makes this a classic. It's also written as a unified piece. In other words, there's no references in this book. It's written in a way that is a self-contained classic, so to speak, of describing Jewish mysticism to a general audience. And it was published in Hebrew in 1980 with a English translation and a translation into many languages. I have read this book several times. In fact, all of the books that we will provide notes with are books that I've read many times. I will provide some of my own reflections on the books, but we'll try to keep this as succinct and to the point as possible to give an introduction to this book so that people can enjoy it and maybe get more from the book itself. So let's proceed. We only see a fraction of the spectrum of light, and this is a master parable, so to speak, of what is going on in the spiritual worlds. We only see a fraction. We can only experience a certain fraction of the spectrum of reality. Human vision is the example. We have infrared and ultraviolet and X-rays and microwaves and infrared and radio waves, none of which we see. We can only see an incredibly small fraction. The truth is that we are part of a vast system of spiritual worlds, but we only see the physical world, which is a very, very narrow perspective. And these spiritual worlds do not exist somewhere else. They exist right here in frequencies and dimensions of being that our physical instruments, our bodies, are not built to comprehend. And there are a general system of worlds. And what is interesting to note is that these worlds interpenetrate with other worlds. That is going to be a very important part of the puzzle here to understand. But that the universe is an infinitely complex exchange of influence across these four interpenetrating dimensions. And higher and lower refer only to a dimension's proximity to the primal cause of causality, not physical space. The first cause being the prime mover, the source of all, God. Now, these four systems of worlds are not Jewish in origin, believe it or not. This is not described in the book, but these worlds were originally described in Neoplatonic thought and have been adapted and are actually fairly specific to this Neoplatonic thought that influenced a lot of philosophies, but specifically in this case, in terms of the systems of worlds, heavily influenced Jewish thought. These four worlds are action, which is where we reside, which is you could call it the furthermost portion of these worlds, the physical and lower spiritual domain. The world of formation, which is a world of pure emotion and feeling. And as a teacher of mine later on described it as well as a world of image. Creation, the world of pure intellect and mind, and the world of emanation, which is the origin or the Godhead. Steinsaltz discusses that things are broken down in terms of three dimensions: mansion, or the space, year, or time, so space, time, and soul, or space, time, and consciousness. The origins of consciousness itself are essentially in that world of emanation. It's the ultimate source. It's where the pure, unadulterated light of God exists. There's absolute clarity and transparency. There's no hiding, no separation, no individual I, and it's essentially indistinguishable from the Godhead itself. Additionally, nothing else can exist there, essentially, because there is no separation. It is just pure, unadulterated emanation of light. Below that is the world of creation, and this is where we see classic Kabbalistic metaphors such as the divine throne. This is the crossroads of existence. Here is where the plenty coming from above and the communication and messages coming from below meet. Here is where pure intelligence and the mind of as a creator take shape. It's the very edge of independent existence, because again, we just spoke about how in the world of emanation, nothing else can exist. And there is an allure to that place, to be submerged and into the world of emanation. That's why some of the beings in the worlds below yearn to be taken up into the world of emanation. But the pure intelligence in the world of creation and the mind as a creator take shape. It's the very edge of independent existence where the first concept of a separate self is born. We spoke about the world of formation a bit as a place of emotion, the domain of pure feeling. The substance of this world is emotion, impulses, drives, and inclinations, and its native inhabitants are conscious manifestations of these impulses, known as angels. It's interesting that those people, such as Robert Monroe, who was what you would call an out-of-body explorer, described having to pass through a domain of feeling, essentially, of beings that are various gradations of feeling. The world of action is our domain. It's divided not only into a physical domain, which is, of course, governed by mechanical, chemical, and biological laws, but also has a spiritual world attached to it. This is the world of the realm of human ideas and abstract philosophy. So, how does a world exist apart from the infinite? If divine plenty manifested in its complete fullness, there could be no room for anything else. We spoke about that a bit in the world of emanation. The source is infinite, is blinding in its all-encompassing energy, I guess you could say. Nothing else can exist. So a screen needed to be placed. This is sort of a cosmic barrier. It's a metaphor, of course. There is no physical screen. It is the cosmic barrier. It is the central imagery of Genesis. It is what is described as darkness on the face of the deep. It obscures the light, allowing a mold of a separate world to be imprinted in that shadow. The result is the independent existence, and without that screen, we would be consumed by the light. And again, it is also interesting that there have been people who have come to this understanding, known in this contraction, of course, of light. Another way of looking at it is known as Tzimtzum, which we'll talk about later in the book, but it is this contraction of infinite light to allow for independent existence to take place. And there have been people who have come up with this idea, not knowing about this philosophy as well, because I remember reading a book by a guy by the name of Michael Hutchinson years ago who suffered a terrible series of accidents. And in his deep recovery, he was able to experience the blinding light of a portion, I guess you could say, of the blinding light of God, of infinity, and realized at that point that everything else needed to be, and he describes in his words, a contraction. I mention it only because there have been people who have experienced an understanding of this without having this idea from any sort of philosophical background. The angel, of course, in modern parlance, is a winged person. And discussing why that is not a good example of an angel, we should talk about the concept of angel. See, the prophetic visions of winged creatures are essentially using the language of our minds, of our existing minds, to create an image that is anthropomorphic, you could say. They're inadequate human translations, physical vessels used to describe formless spiritual realities. This comes back to a lot of ideas, even of modern day, that we are going to give it, when we experience a spiritual reality, we are going to use images from our minds. We might see Star Wars imagery or Star Trek imagery, depending on how deeply involved we are with that. It is our minds giving an image to a spiritual reality. But an angel is, according to this book, a manifestation of a single unadulterated emotion or drive. They're also cosmic messengers. They're like the transport mechanisms of the universe, carrying vital plenty down from the higher worlds and carrying human actions upward. And they are static essence, like physical forces of nature, gravity, magnetism. An angel has one mission and does not change its essence. That doesn't mean that it isn't an independent existence with an identity. It just means that the world that they live in and their mode of being is singular. Again, it doesn't mean that they don't have an identity and are not able to interact with the world as an entity. They are conditioned by their world as we are conditioned by ours. We contain more contradictions. That doesn't make us necessarily better or more independent in identity. Obviously, as you progress up the worlds, there's less of an independent existence. But when we're talking about the world above the world of action, there is still independent existence and identity. So while they are uniform and they are more singular in essence, they still have a well-defined identity. So let's talk about it. This helps a little bit. The core essence is of the human soul, complex, multifaceted, contains contradictions. It is in this world, of the world of action, where we can have two things that are opposites next to each other. In the worlds above, you can't do that. They are in different spaces, so to speak. Something that is opposite the other does not reside in a similar place. It is a singular essence. The angelic reality is a single essence. It's one-dimensional. The operating system of the human soul is dynamic. It's capable of distinguishing good from evil, whereas it is described here, the angelic reality, as static, fixed within rigid limits given at creation. Some of these angelic realities existed from the beginning of creation, and others came by later. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And the trajectory is that the human soul possesses a divine spark, which means that it can ascend to the highest heights or fall and backslide. Whereas the angelic reality is essentially the same, eternally capable of moral shifting. And the origin? Well, the human soul spans all four worlds simultaneously. We'll talk more about that later in the book when we talk about the higher aspects of the human soul. But our reality, of course, and what we realize in the majority of our world is the lowest aspect of our souls, which is inhabited by the world of action. The angelic reality is bound to a specific higher dimension, formation, or creation. Every act creates an entity. This is introduced early in the book and has such profound implications, as you will see, that it is, if it is taken to be true by the reader, profound in its implications, because it means that every emotion, intention, all the essential holiness of a human act combine to become an objective reality. So how does this work? Starting at the bottom, the deed. Man performs an act or prayer in the physical dimension, and it essentially detaches. The essential energy of the act detaches from physical place, time, and person. And other philosophies have also this idea where they talk about thought forms and what are called egregores that are creations of the human mind. Third is the objectification. It can break into the world of formation and birth a literal new angel. Purer acts, of course, are going to create more well-defined entities, so to speak, whereas less formed, less coherent, less intentional acts do the opposite. Therefore, the great saints of the world, the great tzaddikim of the world, who possessed that deep intention and focus, create and can affect reality in a much deeper way because of the dedication, devotion, and single-mindedness and concentration of these acts. And then finally, the transformation. This human-made angel alters the systems of the higher worlds. Think of it as a prayer ascending and establishing a direct communion with the divine. It reminds me of a story by the Baal Shem Tov, where he is in a small town and he looks in through the window and of the synagogue, and he sees all these angels, and the people are there when he says that, and they're so pleased. He sees all these. He sees, I believe, it was prayers, essentially. And they're, of course, pleased, but he says that because there was lack of intention, they just didn't have the power to ascend. Something that just occurred to me as I was talking here. The next idea that was discussed is the klipa, the outer shell. So just as sacred acts build the holy system, human malice interacts with realms of evil, the klipa. Klipa noga, the neutral zone, is the immediate boundary layer. It's neither inherently holy nor evil. It's the neutral ground of the world, of the material world, of the world of action. It reminds me of the neutral zone of Star Trek, and you would go there, but nothing really took place because you couldn't really do anything. You would have to leave and make the decision to leave the neutral zone for anything else to happen. Below that, of course, are thoroughly evil worlds, dynamically connected by bonds of transformation, growing more emphatic with each descending level. And in these areas are subversive angels, just like in the other worlds, known as, technically, you could be calling them demons, but they are emanations of anti-holiness, expressing impulses of wickedness or fear and corruption. In other words, various grades of evil emotion, fear and corruption, all kinds of gradations, just like you can have gradations of love and gradations of charity. You can have the same in the lower worlds as well. And these act as parasites. These creatures of the evil realms are not independent entities in the sense that they are not necessarily able to exist on their own. They do have identities as independent, but they are not, in terms of their essence, do not have the ability to exist on their own. They have no life force of their own. They're strictly contingent upon the vital power that comes from humans. Again, this sort of thing has also been described in other traditions where various entities subsist on the energy generated by humans. So what do we have here? We have a vicious cycle of human malice, the objectification of hate or thought, leading to the birth of these angels. Just like a prayer can ascend, an evil act can descend, so to speak, and a demon is created. This can then lead to a tempter and punisher. In other words, the entity returns because you have created birth to it, returns to incite more evil and enact in punishment, which leads to anguish, and man suffers at the hands of the very domain that he created, which leads to a description of hell as a place not that you are sent to, but a closing of the circle, that the soul is being forced into contact with and punished by the precise manifestations of evil it created itself until the anguish is exhausted. I wonder about this particular aspect of it. I think there have been nice descriptions of people who have ascended to spiritual worlds where they become in touch with a clear conception of what they did in their life, kind of like a world review, and that some of that is related to, can you imagine if you were able to see your life in review and see the times that you wasted time, that you didn't do the kind act that was available to you, that you didn't realize your potential? This is a sort of anguish that you would experience. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine seeing it with perfect, clear lens, everything about your life? It would cause anguish. And that, to me, is a type of hell. But in this book, we're given this description. And while there have been some near-death experiences where people have reported that they've had this sort of experience, the overwhelming majority of near-death experiences, if you take any validity to them, and also those people like Robert Monroe who have ascended in a way, we do not see this sort of hell. However, I will say that even with Robert Monroe, he does describe mansions, places where people so obsessed with certain negative ideas go to, and they are essentially in a world that is a gradation of evil that they need to get out of. In other words, there may be a certain type of evil neurosis and an entire mansion, entire place of people who are consumed by that sort of idea. He does talk about that, and that has a similarity to the ideas here, with the exception that the specific angels or demons, so to speak, are not necessarily present. Nonetheless, we're talking about this book, and in this book and in various other books, because this is essentially a synthesis of very common Kabbalistic ideas. If you can create an angel that is going to ascend, you can create a demon that does exactly the same. And that is the idea here. Man is the cosmic nexus. We spoke about how angels are singular. Man is complicated. He has power. He has the power to shrink evil. Because, as we spoke about, with these entities, by liberating oneself from them, man literally starves those realms of evil, compelling them to shrink back to their original mold, and in some cases can actually change those realms, those parasitic realms of evil, to a higher one, to a good one. And in that case, that is one of the reasons why you have this power that says that the repentant one can, where he stands, even the greatest tzaddik can't stand, because he has the power to take where he was from and turn it into good. Power to elevate. Man possesses this unique capability to change corrupt worlds completely, as I said, to pull them upward and even include them in the system of the holy. So the vastness and magnificent scope of human purpose, the entire cosmos is reacting to this human operating system. And other cultures have described that the idea is that man is this cosmic nexus of capable of this choice, and that's what makes this world so special. It is a place where these worlds of good and evil exist together, mixed up all together, and we have the choice in front of us to make that choice for good or for evil. So you are writing the code of the universe. The spiritual universe is not something happening to you. It is a system built, sustained, and directed by you. The New Thought movement in the United States, of course, spoke about this recently and devoted an entire philosophy to it, where you can, manifestation was a buzzword and still a buzzword among some New Age communities, but isolated and separated from the entire structure of the world is a perversion, so to speak, of speaking just about manifestation as a religion in and of itself. Nonetheless, every thought, emotion, and action you produce bridges the dimensions of being that has the capability of rising to the highest heights or descending to the lowest lows. You do not just live in the world of action. You are the engine of all the worlds. We spoke about the meeting place, the chariot, that is in the world of creation. Imagine if pure acts of good and can ascend to the highest of heights, but yet also having the recognition that by your choices you can also have entities descend to the lowest of lows. You are essentially writing the code of the universe. You have incredible capabilities at your hands. And this is the end of chapter 1. I look forward to seeing you in the next chapter.